So, ladies and gentlemen, let's warm up our hands as we welcome our guest who's going to give us a welcoming note. He is the CEO of FSD Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Ermias.
Thank you. Good morning. So my name is Ermias Eshetu. I'm from FSD Ethiopia. I'm the CEO. We are primarily advocates for the financial sector. We're established with a view to bring about a deeper financial sector that's more efficient, resilient, and sustainable. FSD stands for Financial Sector Deepening. We are a non-profit funded by Gates and FCDO, the UK government. We've been working in this space over the last couple of years, particularly here in Ethiopia. And I'm here today because this is part of our private sector engagement. Somebody's smiling. So this is, we work with the public sector, we work with the private sector and development partners. So just so that we work towards a much more resilient financial industry and an ecosystem to be formed here in Ethiopia. I have a few slides. It's not too boring. I will not take too much time. FSD is a group of entities across Africa. We have offices across 11 territories, including Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Uganda, etc., etc. We work in 27 African countries, primarily working towards a much more efficient capital market system. Our purpose is in the development of accessible, inclusive, and sustainable financial markets. And more recently, over the last 2 years, with the government of Ethiopia introducing a more liberal reform and all this good news we hear from the central bank and from the government, the Ethiopian entity has become a top priority, and therefore we have established FSD Ethiopia and now have a very well established team and working towards the development of the financial sector. As I said earlier, we're primarily supported by the UK government, FCDO, and Gates. It's a unique setup and architecture, but we have our own independent board. The board is composed of private sector and our development partners, and the aim is to make sure that we are properly governed towards delivering the market design and efficiency that is expected of us as an objective from our funders. We have I want to go through this very quickly because our purpose being here in Ethiopia is to work with the government or public sector as well as the private sector. So most of you, that's why we're here today, and this is why I wanted to bring this up. We utilize what we call our strengths as identified here. So we look at solving macro problems. So macro level problems. So we're not like a typical development agency or aid agency, or we're not like that. We look at specifically in terms of solving macro problems, macro issues that is kind of constraining in the market system. We use our independence and neutrality, so we're not taking any particular bias in one side, so we're not swayed in one way or another. Of course, we will piggyback behind the government agenda to reform, but we are also equally neutral to the idea of working with the private sector and making sure that a thriving private sector develops in the market system. Of course, the third point is taking the market system approach. So we really advocate a market system approach to thrive here in the future financial sector in Ethiopia. We use our role as a market facilitator. Again, you probably seen FSD Ethiopia working with the Capital Market Authority, with ESX, working with a central bank or other key entities. So we're purely facilitators. This is primarily led by those government entities. We're not doing that job. It is just to make sure that we support this macro level changes. And of course, we take advantage of our deep understanding of the Ethiopian context as well. So this is really the key characteristics of FSD Ethiopia. What makes us unique in this space? We're not a typical level, development or agencies, slightly different. And we categorize our activities by connecting the dots. So when we work with the key partners in this process, we try to work with the central bank, or we work with the Ethiopian investment holding, etc. So we try to connect the dots where we need to be key advocates to facilitate and make things happen on the ground. We close any gaps and, of course, create linkages so that where there's a need to bring about conversations amongst key policymakers or regulatory authorities, we will go the extra step to bring those key important entities to come together and convene and discuss and solve the problems. Priority areas, so we have a technical assistance program. So again, we prioritize by providing technical assistances. Research and data is very important. So we will work very hard bringing about some key insight using data, and of course conveying and advocacy, and I'll come to that. Our theory of change looks like this. So basically, FSD Ethiopia is working toward this, bringing those important key impacts. We want to be able to achieve some sort of poverty reduction on a national level, social inclusion, quality economic growth, and resilient green economy. So these are very important, that are the defining characters for FSD Ethiopia, and the beneficiaries are outlined there. So we work with the government, with corporates, private entities, MSMEs, individuals, and households. So basically, these are the ultimate beneficiaries we're working toward this. In our theory of change, the key outputs you'll see at the bottom: the strengthened capacity of financial ecosystem actors. So this is most of you, the private sector. Improved enabling regulatory policy environment in the financial sector. This is why we interact with the National Bank of Ethiopia, with ABE, with all the key actors, trying to gel together the loose ends that we need to get some velocity in our ecosystem. Increased availability of financial sector data, information and analytics. Again, working closely with the National Bank, we're trying to advocate and bring about some insight in the way we make decisions. So that's our theory of change, and I'm not going to take too much time on this. Basically, supporting the development of accessible, inclusive, and sustainable financial market for the economic growth and development of Ethiopia. So that's our overarching vision. So we have three important pillars. The first pillar is the financial inclusion pillar, where the digital financial services is our key focus area. The second one is access to capital, and the third one is climate finance. We've chosen this through a very lengthy consultative process, and our strategic map, we worked closely with BCG, Boston Consulting. So we didn't want to come up with something that we've created from nowhere. We went out there, we spoke to a lot of you in the banking industry, in the insurance sector, regulators. Over 84 participants provided insight to come up with this strategy where we focus our interventions on those key areas. So financial inclusion, it talks about digital financial services, inclusion of women, making sure we have a lubricated digital payment systems, driving increased access, usage, and quality of financial services for individuals. So a lot of this we will focus to bring about a more dynamic and efficient financial inclusion platform. And the access to capital is where we work with the capital market space. We have a very close working relationship with the capital market authority and the Ethiopian Security Exchange. You will know that they are doing an incredible job. They are the ones who are running in front, but we are providing some technical support from behind. So on the capital markets, we've provided a number of supporters to bring about the regulation that we have in place at the moment. Now that the capital markets team is fairly well established, as you can see, there's a lot of activities going on, and we're supporting wherever is needed with the capital markets team. On the other side, now that we have a very defined security exchange team working on the launch of the security exchange, you've seen some of the bank officials I see here. You've been invited for the roadshow to fund the Ethiopian Security Exchange, which I saw Dr. Tilaun earlier. Where are you, Dr. Tilaun? Yes, right at the back. So Dr. Tilaun, Mike, and they are doing this incredible job. They're working towards raising 1 billion birr. The government of Ethiopia is committed through EIH to invest 25% of that, and financial institutions have been invited to fund 75% of the remaining amount. So this is a historical occasion where the government and the private sector is coming together to form one of the most important entity in this country, the Ethiopian Security Exchange, the stock market, right? So this team has a very well-defined roadmap, and there's no budging. And I think it's quite public now that last week Dr. Brook stated by saying you can mortgage on it. So his commitment to launch the market in 2024 is so firmly defined. He said you can take a mortgage on it. So it's happening. So really important that you all take a note of the new economic and opportunities and the new ecosystem that is coming through the access to capital, the capital markets and the financial markets pillar. Our finance director, Fasil, is sitting at the back. You probably saw him yesterday moderating one of our sessions. Climate finance, why climate finance? I know this is not top priority for us in this country at the moment, but it has to become at some point. There's plenty of finance that we can bring to Ethiopia, affordable, cheap financing, and therefore we've put that as a key pillar. You would probably recall that about 2.5 months ago, we launched the first climate report in Ethiopia. And this climate report primarily focused on the key findings when it comes to the opportunities in climate and climate finance. Blended finance nowadays, it's a big topic. There's plenty of financing internationally, and we are working towards that so that it gains the visibility that the regulators and the key actors need to pay attention to. So across and these three key pillars, inclusion of women is very important for us. So find as a key metrics for our performance. We have inclusion of rural communities. So even though we are being very active here in Addis, we are working across Ethiopia, across the regions. One of the key projects I'll mention later on when it comes to financial inclusion, and we're looking at also embracing, leveraging the youth opportunities. I know I've taken a little bit more time. These are the key projects that we've launched at the moment. So expanding basic financial access under the financial inclusion, supporting financial sector reforms, deepening financial sector services, supporting an inclusive insurance sector. All of these are the key focus areas for the financial inclusion pillar. In terms of access to capital, I've already mentioned strengthening capital market regulation, developing the capital market ecosystem, and enhancing SME access to capital. Those are the key areas, thematic areas. When it comes to climate finance, as I said earlier, advancing climate finance as an issue, as an agenda is where we're focusing. These are quite a few projects. I'm not going to go through all of them, just in the interest of your time. But very, very important. They're very well defined. It's not something that we've written out of the bloom or something. They are very well defined. We've taken, as I said earlier, consultation with the regulators, consultation from the financial sectors, consultation from the private sector, etc. So in that, we've defined these projects. So at the moment, we have the National Financial Inclusion System implementation that we're working with the National Bank of Ethiopia, and Ato Solomon here, who is Vice Governor. It comes under his oversight. The Regional Financial Inclusion Framework, we're working on it. So this basically for the National Financial Inclusion Strategy. So this is a National Financial Inclusion Strategy. I don't know how many of you may have read that strategy, but again, gives you a much broader perspective of what is to come across Ethiopia when it comes to financial inclusion. Very important document. So that strategy, the implementation of that strategy also looks at the Regional Financial Inclusion Framework. So we are working on all of this. There's another quick highlight I wanted to tell you. We're looking at use cases that leverage the national payment infrastructure. Ato Malaku, the National Bank, a lot of people who have worked hard in the payment system will recognize this. And we're working also on, at the bottom, the InsurTech Accelerator Program. How are we doing for time? Am I taking too much time? Okay. So the InsurTech Accelerator Program is one, we launched it in Kigali. So basically to support Ethiopian entrepreneurs in the insurance space. And 4 Ethiopian companies we have taken as a cohort this time, and will be, I think they're trying to tell me that I've overrun my time. Okay, so no, I'm not going to go through this because it's just the same thing I've just highlighted. These are some of the projects, development regional implementation framework, the national implementation, the regional implementation framework. We have interoperable G2P payment using the national payment infrastructure. Again, trying to highlight how we can scale digital payment on a national level. We have a Bima Lab Africa InsurTech. You can see in collaboration with Swiss Re, Telsystic, and FSD Africa. We've launched this in Kigali. 4 Ethiopian cohorts have been enrolled already, but we're going to launch a much bigger one very soon that is going to be specific for Ethiopia. We have the pension fund. This is very interesting. A lot of you here must know that there's a chunk of money sitting with the pension funds, and we're working with the National Bank, the Ministry of Finance, and the board to develop a strategy for the pension funds. So this is, again, a potential provision of liquidity to the capital market system in the future. We have, as you know, the Knowledge Series. The Knowledge Series is one key platform where we are advocating policy change and the convening of the private sector and regulators and public sector to come together. So that is there. The support for ESX, we're working with the ESX team. We're developing the rule books. This is basically how the stock market is going to run and how it's going to be governed, etc. We have a communication strategy. We're working with the ASX team, another program that we have launched. These are our key strategic partners. So the Ministry of Finance at the moment, the National Bank, of course, the Capital Markets Authority, Ethiopian Investment Holdings, and ESX. So these are key important partners for us. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I've taken too much time.
Thank you very much.